They buried me in the water and I came, I knew. Ha ha. Now I'm baptized in blue. I'm a fighter, I'm a winner, never quit. I refuse to lose. I got heart and I got grit. See, I'm a warrior that's been baptized in blue. I'm a warrior that's been baptized in blue. I'm a fighter, I'm a winner, never quit. I refuse to lose. I got heart and I got grit. See, I'm a warrior that's been baptized in blue. I'm a warrior that's been baptized in blue.
What's up, sheepdog? Welcome to the Changing the Culture podcast. That was my boy at One Time Music. Go look him up on all the socials, Instagram. You can go find all of his music. That song is called Baptized in Blue. You're going to be able to listen to that at the end of this podcast episode. I hope you enjoy this episode, and I hope you enjoy One Time's music. He's a fellow police officer. He's the man. I love this guy. Go listen to his shit. Welcome to this week's podcast episode. I'm excited for you to meet. His name is Nick. He is a podcast host of the Roll Call Room podcast. Go check that podcast out. This epide's all going to be about how he was a sergeant, who tried to commit suicide. He failed. Some other things happened. He ended up, he's out of the job now, doing his podcast full time, and you are going to have this is going to be one of our longer podcast episodes, but you're going to, this episode's really good and very relatable for very, very many, unfortunately, first responders. I hope that you enjoy. In the show notes, you're going to be able to get Nick's book. He just put out a book. Let's make sure that we support him. Enjoy.
Hey, everyone. My name is Nick. I am one of the hosts of the Roll Call Room podcast, a law enforcement podcast devoted to mental health for law enforcement and first responders. I'm also recently an author of a book. It's about to come out, finally, called Police Mental Barricade, A Survivor's Guide to Poor Law Enforcement Leadership. And my focus and real devotion is mental health for first responders, which is something that really is brought to the forefront fairly recently.
Which is why you're a perfect fit for this podcast, because we're all about changing the culture. So Nick, tell us a little bit about, like, what's your story?
So I was with a law enforcement agency in Virginia. I held a position of sergeant for 7 years. My last year as a sergeant was probably one of the most mentally tough. I had an officer who was diagnosed with cancer and passed away, unfortunately. I was there.
I'm so sorry.
Yeah, it was probably one of the toughest things. But then right after that came some really poor leadership decisions within my department, specifically working for a very toxic leader. I did the normal thing. I went through the avenues within my department to try and remedy the things that were wrong, and the department didn't do anything about it. So I left. So I quit, and I quit the profession, and I went into the civilian world, and I hated it. I missed it. I missed the calling. And that's what I do call it. It's a calling. I lasted for 2 weeks in the civilian world. And in all honesty, day one, I knew I was going to quit. Like the first day at work, I came home and I was like, this is not for me. Like, I can't continue doing this. So I called my chief of police that I had a terrible exit interview with, because I never thought I was going to come back. So lesson learned to folks, be reserved in your exit. But I ate a big slice of humble pie, and I apologized and asked for my job back. And the chief, to my surprise, said, "Hey, you can come back." And I said, "Can I come back as a sergeant?" And he was like, "Yeah, absolutely. You can come back as a sergeant." So they put me through the whole hiring process all over again. Mind you, I was only gone for 2 weeks. So I'm like, why is this taking 2 months to get rehired? I go to sign my new offer letter, and they demoted me. They put me down as a patrol officer. And at the time, I needed a job. Like, I didn't have any time to argue with it. So I took the job, and it got worse from there. they put me through field training again. So I had been an officer with them for
Stop.
14 years. And they
Stop.
put me through field training with an officer who had 2 years on. And it was all about embarrassment. It was all about shaming and just all the most terrible things that you could think about. And there were other things here and there that it was very clear that my return back to the department was for one reason and one reason only, which was to set a tone of this is what happens to you when you abandon this agency. It got so bad to the point that on May 25th, 2019, I sent my family out of the house and I attempted to kill myself.
Wow.
That's how bad the stress was. And it had nothing to do with the stressors of the many, many horrible scenes that I've seen, the many homicides, the many children that have passed and horrific car accidents. It had nothing to do with that. None of that was the reason why I did what I did. It was all because of poor law enforcement leadership.
The culture.
The culture is so bad in our profession. It's just not my former agency. And I say former because we're going to get there. So I didn't complete. So I'm still here. Thank goodness. And I moved on. I went and got help, and I went and took medication, which I was very, very against. Anybody that's on here that's like me, that's a manly man that doesn't take medication even for the flu. Taking mental health medication as a law enforcement profession is something that you will fight like tooth and nail, because we see a lot of people that are on mental health medication and we see how erratic the behavior is, and I was against it. And now I live through it, and I can tell you that there's reasons why they're like that. So comes October. So this was May. Now comes October. October, I decide, hey, I need to tell my story. So I start a podcast. I start the Roll Call Room podcast. I start this podcast, you know what it's like. You start a podcast, you look at the numbers and you're like, all right, a couple people are listening to this. It could be just the departments listening to it. By November, it had turned into like 10,000 listeners, 15,000 listeners around there. And it was growing, and it was growing fast. And my former co-host that was with me at the time, we were like, they're going to shut us down any minute, any day. Like 5 was the magic number. We were like, 5 is going to be the number. They're going to shut us down, and this is going to be the end of it.
Wow.
And 5 came and went. Then early December hit, and we were at the 25,000 listener mark. So it had taken it was just steamrolling.
Huge. Yeah.
And then comes the phone call. Comes the phone call from the chief. Hey, I need to see you. And I'm like, here we go. And
what were you talking about?
We, looking back at it now, we didn't tiptoe. We went into it full and hard. We attacked leadership. We told stories about poor command decisions. We told stories about vindictiveness. We told stories about positional equity, which is something that I talk about in my book, which is you're only as important to me as what you can do for my career. And we told stories about specific commanders without saying their names. So we hid their names, which still probably wasn't the smartest thing in the world, looking back. So I got called in separate from my co-host, and it was my chief, my assistant chief, and the human resource manager. And he, as soon as I walked in, he was like, roll call room, Nick. And I was like, oh, this is what this is going to be about. And he was like, so let's talk about this podcast. And the first thing out of my mouth was, I was like, I'm not taking it down. I'm not taking this thing down. And I knew what this meeting was about. So at this point, I had about 50 to 100 emails from fans that were thinking about committing suicide, that were no longer thinking about it.
Way.
Yeah.
Wow.
One was a wife who listened to an episode, noticed some of the stuff that we were talking about, confronted her husband. Her husband turned around and was like, I was going to kill myself tonight, and took her downstairs to the basement. And he had these letters like laid out for her and the kids, and just had it laid out. And she had challenged them and said, you're displaying all of these things. So I said, listen, I'm not taking it down. And I showed him the letters, and I was like, he goes, well, I'm getting a lot of flack from the commanders about the stuff that you're saying. And I said, well, are they angry because I'm saying it, or are they angry because it's true? And he's like, well, maybe it's a little bit of both of them. And I go, well, then they need to do some soul searching. They need to do some self-reflecting and understand that their poor leadership decisions that they're making are causing major mental health issues within the agency.
Mm-hmm.
And what I noticed by doing the podcast was, after roll call, the little powwows that happen after roll call, there were many officers that would come up. And because I was vulnerable on the podcast, they would come up and they would say, hey, listen, I'm experiencing the same thing. And I'm afraid to go talk to somebody because I'm afraid I'm going to lose my job. I'm afraid they're going to take my gun and I'm going to lose my job. And I was like, well, first of all, you don't have to tell them anything. You don't have to disclose anything, any medication. You don't have to disclose anything that you don't want to. I didn't. And matter of fact, my department didn't even know about it until my exit. So this discussion with the chief, we ended it with that we would no longer tell specific stories about commanders. And we would cut back on the cursing because there was quite a bit of cursing. Which,
sounds like me.
Yeah. But I'm from New York City. I live in Virginia now. I'm from New York City. Every other word is F and S.
That's how we do it up in New England, man.
I can't change it.
No?
So, and it's not natural. Like, we tried to do a family friendly episode, and it just sounded stupid.
Yeah.
Like, it was just, and I was like, oh, Frankfurter. Listen, nobody wants to listen to that garbage. Like, you're a midnight officer and you're in a parking lot or you're driving around, and you don't want to hear that. You want to hear the tough, raw language. That's what you want to hear.
Mm-hmm.
So I leave. At the meeting, he goes, listen, I know about your First Amendment right, yada, yada, yada. This is what we're going to do is we're going to send it to the city attorney's office and make sure that you're not stepping on any third rails or any landmines, and make sure that you're covered, because you are in law enforcement. So your First Amendment right, you do have First Amendment right to a certain extent as a law enforcement officer. I said, okay, no problem. We had already had an attorney, so we knew that we were good. We didn't name our agency. We didn't name people specifically. And we did that for a reason. And we never released our last names. And we never, ever released our faces. So if you ever look at our logo, it's all cartoons. And the reason why we did that was because for legal purposes. So February comes around. So we fast forward. Let me back up. So this is December. January, I take the lieutenant's process from an officer. The way that they wrote the lieutenant's process was, you only need to be a sergeant for 3 years. Well, they didn't write in the process that you needed to be a current sergeant. So I took the process. This really irritated a lot of people. So the results come out. Okay. Results come out in the end of January, and I scored number 4 out of 27.
Wow.
Five promotions about to happen. So it's a guarantee. This is happening. It's unheard of for a patrol officer to get a butter bar. It's unheard of, right? February rolls around. February 20th rolls around. City attorney delivers their findings to me and my co-host. Said, hey, you're good to go. The only violation that you have is that you're selling T-shirts on your website, and you need to have an off-duty form because you're making a profit. You have an off-duty job. We're like, no problem. 1-page form, bing, bang, boom, done. Okay. February 21st. So that was February 20th. February 21st, I get issued a write-up from when I was a sergeant for theft of items from the police department. Theft of items from the police department. Ironic that it was the day after the city attorney says that we're good to go. So when I find out about this, I start printing out emails and text messages from the organization that bought the items. And when I had left the agency, there were items that were left in my office, and they had to email me. They said, hey, some of these items are missing. And back a year ago, I had written in, thank God I keep all my emails. I wrote in the email, I said, listen, since you can't find it, tell me how much it all comes to. I'll cut you a check for it. Just go buy it again. So this is in February. April 20th, I forgot to tell you, when I got rehired, they put me on a year of probation after being with the agency for 14 years. So they put me on probation. My probation ends April 28th. April 20th, they pull me into internal investigations. They interview me, And everything that they interview me about, I'm pulling out emails and text messages, and the person who's interviewing me in the internal investigation, you can tell they just don't care. They're just like, you're done.
Mm-hmm.
Virginia is a right to work state, which means while you're on probation, they can fire you for anything, no cause whatsoever.
Yeah.
They don't like the way your shoes are tied, you're fired.
Mm-hmm.
They hand over the investigation to the chief on the 25th. My probation ends the 28th. And chief goes, hey, this doesn't look good, and I don't think you're going to come out of this okay. And I was like, well, I'm not going to allow you to fire me. I resign. And I left.
Wow.
Yeah. And it is all because of this podcast. And I told my chief on my phone call conversation with him, I said, is this really the way that you want to do this? And I said, this is the hill that I'm ready to die on, because this podcast is that important to me. Be cautious with what you're about to do. And just didn't care. So a lot of new things have developed since then. I've been not with the agency since April. So April 25th, somewhere around there, was my last day. I've just been sitting around doing podcast stuff, and did a whole bunch of FOIA requests for emails and text messages of stuff that was going on behind the scenes while this was going on. And it's astounding how you can see how these leaders, quote unquote leaders, do the things that they do behind scenes. It's shameful. It's shameful. And when you look at the current events now with the riots and defunding and stuff like that, really we should be looking at our top leadership in law enforcement. That's what we should be looking at. We should be reevaluating who's leading these agencies.
100%.
100%. If you have a chief of police that the last time that they strapped up and went out on the street was more than 8 years ago, 5 years ago, it's time to get a new chief. Because we're not in peacetime right now. We are at a time when we need innovative community policing, community-oriented, out-of-the-box thinking in law enforcement right now. We don't need chiefs of police from the 80s and 90s and the early 2000s. We need younger chiefs of police. We need people with innovative ideas. And unfortunately, I say this on my show all the time, the dinosaurs are not dying off quick enough. And I don't want to see anybody die. That's not the analogy, folks.
Yeah.
They're not retiring quick enough. And every time you see a chief of police position open, it's always filled by some grimacely old looking person that looks like they've been in the profession since Elliot Ness. And that's not the way it should be. But when you look at chiefs of police that are in their older 30s, early 40s, those agencies are thriving. Those agencies are good with the community. They're in the community and they're leaders.
Yes.
They're mentors. They're not positional equity leaders. They're not pound into the ground leadership. They're not vindictive leaders. And you can always tell an agency by their internal investigations unit.
Yeah.
Is their II being used as a weapon, or is it used as a performance tool to retrain officers? Listen, nobody wants to work with a bad officer. Nobody wants to. Any good cop that I've ever worked with never wants to work with a bad cop. And that's what II should be generally used for, is for that really, really bad officer. The officer that's on the take, the officer that's too aggressive, has a bad use of force, whatever it is.
Yeah.
II should never, ever be used for stuff that can be handled at the lowest level of performance management. II should never see a cruiser accident, ever.
I know.
No internal investigation should ever touch a cruiser accident. That should be handled at the lowest possible level, unless this person continuously keeps on having cruiser accidents where it's causing property damage to the county or the city.
Right.
And I think that's where we blur the lines with our profession is what's performance management issue and what's actual terminable offenses. And that's what's troubling to me right now is that that's the direction that our profession is going, is that it's more heavy-handed, aggressive punishment. And
I wouldn't even say it's going. I think we're there. We're there, I have to say. And, you bring up so many good points, and I want to circle back around on a lot of things. And I just want to say I'm glad that you're here after, that experience, and I want to talk to you about that. And so I'm really glad that you're here. I'm glad you turned your most negative night, day experience, and you are turning it around, and you have helped so many. And I just see, to me, that's true, perseverance, when you hit your rock bottom and then you're like, you know what, I'm not just going to keep this experience for myself. I'm going to share it. As your story, my story, similar, as far as just hitting rock bottom and then sharing it and being like, there's got to be somebody who's listening, and so I really want to just shout you out for that. I really admire you and respect you a lot for that. I also want to just talk about, I don't want to get into it too much because I feel like all we've all been hearing about is Minneapolis and everything, but I will say this, just to kind of play off of what you're saying. I really, in my heart, I really believe that we should, I'm not saying that those officers aren't like guilty, not guilty. I'm not saying that they're none of that, but I'm just saying, let's go back and look at the culture. Let's, in that law enforcement agency, let's look at the leadership, exactly what you're saying. I think that's so huge. And, I have to ask you, like, you weren't ever worried that any retaliation was going to happen to you? Like when you went back, back and you talked to the chief?
Let me tell you, I loved my agency so much. I was the community policing sergeant for 5 out of 7 years of being a sergeant, which meant that I was responsible for everything that had to do with community policing. And I loved that job. I loved that agency. I went back to it because I missed it so much. I never in a million years thought that they would do what they did. And even so, that when I went back, I overlooked being put through field training again. I overlooked a lot of the stuff that was going on. But the podcast, I never ever thought that I would lose my job over it. And it would be disguised as a internal investigation for theft. Because to me, that's one of the worst things that you can call a cop.
Oh, hands down.
And then what I forgot to tell you is the conclusion of the investigation went from being accused to being a thief to the final determination was misuse of department property. So it went from you stole it to you misused it. And it was mind blowing. I actually, when I went into the interview room for internal investigations, I was actually laughing because I thought it was a joke. It was so bad, the amount of stuff that they didn't have, that as a law enforcement officer, if somebody would have called me and I had to call for service for that, I would have laughed. I'd have been like, get out of here. We're not going to handle this. Like this, right. This is stupid. But it was all because we called out the commanders, and the commander of internal investigation was somebody that we routinely talked about on the podcast because this person had been moved around in the department so many times because they're such a poor, toxic leader. They had been moved around to hide them all over the department.
So they put him in II.
Yeah, they put him in II, which is the worst place you can put somebody like that. And then I forgot to tell you, the 2 sergeants that are in II were on the lieutenant's list, number 5 and number 6 on the list. I was number 4.
Wow.
I mean, it's just like, it was a perfect storm where it was just like, I remember getting my suspension paperwork my suspension paperwork. I was out of town, and I just looked at it and I was like, I can't do this anymore. I can't do this anymore. It's been a year of trying to fit in to an agency that does not want me anymore. They don't want me there.
Right.
They're not buying what I'm selling anymore. And I'm saving more lives by doing this podcast than I am with strapping on a uniform.
Yep.
And I'm all right with that. I'm okay with that.
Yep.
Yeah. It's just, it was a terrible, terrible experience. Very, very terrible.
How are you doing now?
I have my good days and my bad days. I think the podcast, as much as it's therapeutic for the fans, it's very therapeutic for me. I have bouts of like, I treated my job, the 15 years I was with that agency, like a marriage. I loved my job. My kids were very, very small. My one daughter was 3 years old, and my other daughter had just been born when I started that job. And for 15 years, I sacrificed family life with them. Birthday party, got a page that there was a barricade situation. I was on the command team. I left. Kids recital or a community event, every single time. Sacrificed 15 years. So when that ended, It was literally like a marriage breakup. One particular incident I remember, it was a week after I left the agency. I was walking down Target. I was walking down the aisle and just realized that I wasn't working there anymore, that my job was over. Like my professional career in law enforcement is now blacklisted because of what they did, what they put in my jacket. I can never work in law enforcement again. And I was walking down Target and I just started crying, just out of nowhere. And that's not me. Like I mean, the last time I had a good cry was probably about 20 years ago, but it was rough. Like I had to walk out and go run to my car because it had hit me. I was like, they not only just made me leave, they destroyed my law enforcement career. It's done. I will never be able to go back into law enforcement because the first thing that they're going to do is they're going to pull my file and they're going to see that in my file and nobody's going to hire me. Nobody's going to hire me.
Well, unless you make some good connections.
Yeah. You know? Well, I mean, and you know, I'm at a point right now. I'm okay with not being in law enforcement right now. You know,
no shit, huh?
Yeah. Especially currently. I mean, I worked for New York City when Amno Louima happened. I worked for New York City when a couple of the other things that NYPD went through. I worked Ferguson. I worked through Baltimore. I worked through South Carolina incident. I mean, I worked through a lot of these things. And when you're in community policing and you're in charge of community policing, you got to know your stuff. We had an officer-involved shooting in my jurisdiction. I was off duty. The first thing I did was call my community policing officers, and I made them come into work, and I made them knock on every door around where the subject was shot, and I made them tell every single resident exactly what happened before the press even knew about it. And that's unheard of because if you see in law enforcement, it's no comment. It's an ongoing investigation. And we got in front of it so that when the press started knocking on these people's doors, they were like, no. That's not what happened. The police already came here and talked to us and told us the whole story.
Smart.
And that's the type of innovative policing that we need in law enforcement right now. This tight-lipped, behind yellow tape garbage has got to stop.
Yes.
And the dancing around and you know all this other stuff, this cowtailing around and being fake for the public. You can do that all day long, but the proof is in the pudding. Like, what are you doing for your community? And defunding it, you should be funding it, not defunding it. Yeah. You know, a lot of these agencies can't afford training. Right. Like my agency, that a lot of the stuff, unless we got a government grant to go to DWI training or active shooter training, you aren't getting it. Right. Because a lot of these small agencies don't have the money for that. You want to help your police department? You want to help Minneapolis? Fund them. Yeah. Fund them. Train them better. And I talk about this a lot when it comes to them. And I know you said we're not going to touch too much on Minneapolis, but the thing about it is, and where you can see poor leadership in Minneapolis is this: we have somebody that's on right now that's working. You have a radio ear, right? Every officer has a radio ear. You cannot tell me that as a sergeant or a commander, you didn't hear that Breaking Bad early. Right. You can't tell me that you didn't hear that coming. You can't tell me that from the time that officer called at that traffic stop, from the time that he tried putting him in the cruiser and he couldn't get him in the cruiser, you mean to tell me that you didn't put down your croissant and your cup of coffee and jump in your cruiser from headquarters and drive to the location? I know. Because go back and watch those videos again. Count how many people have stripes and count how many people have a butter bar on scene when that went down. I'll tell you, none. None of them were there. And that's a lack of leadership. Because had I have heard that when I was a sergeant and I heard it Breaking Bad, I would have went lights and siren down to the scene and I would have tapped that dude on the back and I would have went, "You're relieved. Take a hike. You're too personally invested in this arrest. You take over, sit him up, put him against the tire, go get him a bottle of water, and then start talking to him, calming things down." That could have been de-escalated at a supervisor level. And that lets me know that Minnesota, either the supervisors are overly worked or their span of control is too large, or they're not trained properly as supervisors or commanders. And
I think-
disbanding them is not the option.
No, I agree. I completely agree. And I think it's all of the above, if I'm honest. Like from what I've heard, the scuttlebutt that I've heard and the officers that have reached out to me, it's all of the above.
Mhm.
And, this was just the straw that broke the camel's back. But like a lot of things have been going on in that agency. But, I couldn't agree more. I wonder, what do you think? Do you think that this will change leadership in law enforcement? Because it's going to, I mean, change is coming. I mean, hello, look at all the shit that's going on. Change is coming. Do you think that we might see change in leadership for good?
No, not in the way that we want to see it change. And I'll tell you why, because I already see it happening. Municipalities like city councils and whatever structure of government you have are heavily looking at upper management to start managing lower level officers on the street. And that's actually the reverse of what you need. Yep. City council members and whatever municipality you have are looking into body cams and all stuff. Body cams are fantastic after the fact.
Right.
After the fact. Body cameras don't stop shootings.
No.
Body cameras don't stop what happened in Minnesota.
Mm-hmm.
It has to be at the leadership level. The DOJ, I almost think, has to start going in and doing full-blown audits for these law enforcement agencies and start re-qualifying top brass in these police departments. Yeah. Are you qualified to lead an agency? Mm. And I'd venture to say that in America, across America, that more than 60% of our law enforcement chiefs and assistant chiefs should not be wearing a uniform.
I couldn't agree more.
Or should have turned it in years ago. Yeah. Years ago. We've all worked for somebody that we're like, how the hell are they still in charge of anybody, let alone themselves?
100%.
And who learned that? The NYPD learned that the hard way. Because when you look at NYPD's videos with the riots and stuff, how many white shirts do you see? A lot. A lot. And the reason being for that is because they're out there leading from the front. They're out there going, whoa, 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 stop, stop, stop. Let it go. I know they just threw a bottle. Let it go. Mm-hmm. Or, okay, go get that person. Mm-hmm. They're leading from the front. The commanders are taking bottles in the face. They're taking punches to the face. And that's how you get your people below to follow you. They'll follow you into the gates of hell if they know that you have their back.
100%.
And that's the problem in our profession right now is that you have a lot of positional equity leaders that are like, whoa, 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 whoa. I can't do that. Like, I'll have you go out and do that. And then you just report back to me, whatever you see. Or they tell you to go do something and then you do it. And they're like, I didn't tell you to do it that way. And you're like, you didn't tell me what way you wanted it done. You said, just do it.
Exactly.
So do I think that there's going to be a change? Yeah, there's going to be a big, huge change in law enforcement. It's just not in the way the boots in the ground really want it to be. And that's unfortunate. I think we're going to see mass exits of people in this profession that are on the fence, whether or not they want to leave. The millennial generation, which is actually, as much as the millennial generation gets a short, they get kicked around. I talk about it in my book. The millennial generation actually is the generation that's going to fix law enforcement.
Yes,
believe it or not.
Yes,
they are actually going to fix the mental health issue within law enforcement, and they're going to fix the leadership issue. If we could just get them to stay longer than 3 years, and that's the problem. The millennial generation, it's not a calling and it's not a job. It's just now. It's just what I got going on now. And if we can get over that hump, I think the millennial generation will be the generation that shapes our profession. But
I think so too.
But I think a lot of them don't want to. I don't think a lot of them want to put up with what they're seeing right now, with the protests and being yelled at and spit on, and for heaven's sake, you can't even have a law enforcement sticker on your car anymore supporting law enforcement.
Hell no.
I had a lawn flag in front of my yard, a thin blue line flag. I had to take it down.
That's across the. I mean, that's across.
That's everywhere. That's everywhere.
It is.
I don't even wear my shirts out in the public. Any law enforcement shirt I don't wear.
Yep.
Sad.
Yep, it is sad. So I want to go back. I want to ask you a couple of things. So because you said something that I talk about all the time. And what you said was, when you tried to commit suicide, you said, Autumn, it wasn't because of the shit that I saw. It was because of what I was dealing with the leadership and the administration and within the culture.
Mhm.
That is 100% by and large what I hear. I'm sure you hear the same thing. I mean, officers, they reach out to me all the time, and it's never about the shit. Like, we have once in a while, you'll have an officer who is in a horrific situation and they can't get it out of their head. But more likely than not, 9 times out of 10, it really is. It's about the culture. It's about the leadership. It's about, all those things. So my question to you is, how do we, when you were in that low, what were can you tell me what your thoughts were like when you were in that low?
Well, I think I'll add to what you said. I think a lot of it has to do with bullying within our profession. We eat our own.
Yes,
we are
we
the
do.
worst with eating our own. We feed on drama. It's like high school. We feed on it. This profession feeds on drama and just putting another person down. What I just completely forgot. What was your question about the day I did it? I'm sorry.
No, it's okay. It's your thoughts. Like, what were your thoughts around?
I think I think it was a lot of it had to do with leading up to May 25th. A lot of it had to do with I really took the rank of sergeant as an identity for myself. Like when they stripped that from me and then they started doing what they did to me, and now looking back on it and thinking about it, it angers me that I even got to that point, because I should never have allowed anyone or anything or any agency to bring you to that point. But it was just, I felt betrayed. I felt lied to. I felt like didn't have a purpose. I was ashamed around my family. My kids were at my graduation ceremony. They loved that their dad was a sergeant. They came out on community events with me while I was the community sergeant, and it was embarrassing. It was embarrassing to the point where I would not get dressed at home with my silver patches on.
Wow.
I was so embarrassed to be around my kids in uniform. And then it would get even more embarrassing because I would go out on calls for service and I would work with just new people that didn't even know who I was and didn't even know that I was a sergeant. Or now I had sergeants supervising me that were officers when I was a sergeant. And it was embarrassing.
Yeah.
It was really, really embarrassing. And it was just a downward spiral. I was like, I just don't see any way out of this. Like I felt lost and helpless, and it was tough. I mean, I went into the planning stage. The first day that I came back to work was April 30th. My first day back as a patrol officer, my captain called me into her office, and I thought that this was going to be the conversation. Welcome back. I know this has got to be really difficult for you. It's got to be tough going from a sergeant back down to an officer. We got your back. Don't worry about it. I walk into her office. My lieutenant is in the office. My new sergeant's in the office, and her. She's like, close the door. And she goes, let me first start off by saying everything that's happening to you right now, you did to yourself. Nobody else did this to you. And if I hear you talking badly about the department or the chief, you won't make it off of probation. That was it. That was the first day I thought about doing it. That was the first day. And every day since then was me convincing myself not to do it. Wow. And then the week before I tried to do it was when I got serious about it. I put all my affairs in order. I made sure all my bank accounts were straight. I made sure that my safe had my deed to my house. I mean, there was just so much preparation that went into it.
Wow.
And
Nick, what kind of mind frame does a person have to be in to be that low? Like, I mean, you must have been like,
I was done. Like I was done. There were times when I actually thought about doing it at work. I remember
so angry with them.
I was so angry with the department, and they had turned me into the what I never ever wanted to become as a patrol officer. When I was a patrol officer and when I was a field trainer and when I was a sergeant, I filled up my tank of gas in the beginning of my shift and I left the end of my shift with an empty tank. I always drove around. I never parked somewhere. I was always getting into something. When they did what they did, I just sat in a parking lot all night. I didn't do anything.
Wow.
It just deflated me to the point where I was like, I got to be careful because I got a target on my back. Like I got to worry about if I make a mistake or if I have a use of force, I'm going to be out of here. That year of probation, I really thought I was going to get fired a lot sooner than I did. And then like once we got past the holidays and then the lieutenant's process happened, I was like, wow, this may actually happen. I may actually get promoted. And as soon as I knew that I was under investigation, like in February, I was like, I'm done. I was like, I knew the writing was on the wall. I knew it was coming. Because it was basically the opportunity of a lifetime for these commanders that we were talking about on the podcast. Because they were like, we got you now. We got you now. You're on. And the thing I forgot to tell you is at the end of my interview with II, the captain who did my interview was like, I don't think you're being truthful. And I was like, okay, send me for a polygraph. And anybody in law enforcement that knows when somebody voluntarily asks for a polygraph, 9 times out of 10, they know that they're telling the truth. There are some people like on the first 48 that say, give me a polygraph. And then like they act all surprised that they failed it. And this is what I got from him. He was like, well, I got to ask the chief, we got to schedule it because of COVID. We don't do it here. We have to have another jurisdiction do it. So it's not biased. And I was like, you're not going to order a polygraph because it's going to take longer than the 5 days. And it's going to be past my probation. And he's like, no, that's not the reason. Sure was the reason. Because past the 5 days, I get off probation, then I have grievance rights in the Commonwealth of Virginia. And that's the reason why they didn't order the polygraph. And that's what's going to bite them in the ass in the end.
Wow.
I can't go into what's happened since.
Right.
But you should never write, this is some advice for your listeners. Try and keep off of your work email and your work cell phones when you're making communication amongst yourselves, because it's all FOIA requestable. It's all available to the public. I'll leave it at that. Wink, wink.
Yeah. Okay. So this happened this year. Like this is like this spring is what you were talking about?
May 25th, 2019 was when I tried.
Okay.
And my last day at work was this April 25th of 2020.
Wow. So
real recent.
So so you tried to take your life. You were unsuccessful, right?
Yep.
Obviously, because you're still here, but like you actually did attempt to.
Mm-hmm.
And then it didn't work. And then what happened?
Well, I remember calling, my wife was in the police academy at the time, and she was driving home. I don't know what she said, but it was something like, what's going on? How you doing? And just broke down. And I said to her, I was like, I tried to kill myself. And she was like, do not get off the phone with me. Stay on the phone with me. What is going on? And I just broke down. I was like, I don't want to do this anymore. I'm tired. I don't want to fight anymore. I feel like a round peg and trying to fit a square hole in this agency. And I love this agency. And she's like, just leave. And I was like, it's not that easy. I love this place. Like, it literally was like a marriage. Like I was like a battered spouse. I was like, I got to make this work. I got to make this work. And, she came home and we went right to the medical facility with our insurance. And thank heaven they were fantastic. Got me right into a psychiatrist. And it's in my book. I remember slumped over and the therapist was like, you look like you got the weight of the world on your shoulders. And I just, for 20 minutes, just broke down. And she's like, we got to get you on some sort of medication. I was like, absolutely not. Nope, not doing it. Nope. And she's like, what's your stigma with medication? I go, I'm a law enforcement officer. I got to carry a gun. I don't want, God forbid I get into a shooting. They're going to piss test me. I'm going to pop hot. I'm going to lose my job. And she's like, no, stop. What have you heard about mental health medication? I was like, I know what I've seen.
Yep.
I've seen people that have been on it and it doesn't work, or
Right.
they stop taking it. And she's like, well, first of all, it takes like 5 to 6 weeks for half of the stuff to get into your system. And, you know, it's not as bad as you think it is. It's not like the movies. And I was like, oh, okay. All right. And I took it. I started taking medication. And the one thing I can remember from taking medication, mental health medication, is that it really worked in the sense where it retrained your brain to not focus on the things that depressed you or things that bothered you. It would pop in my head, and then my brain would just kind of, you know, shake a little bit and go, no, we're not doing that. We're not doing that. What was really weird about it is I started having very, very vivid memories very early on in my life, things that I didn't remember, like childhood memories and stuff. And I call my therapist. I'm like, this is weird as shit. Like, what the hell is going on? What did you give me? And she's like, your brain is no longer focused on PTSD and all this traumatic stuff. It has time now to recall good memories. And I was like, holy shit, this is phenomenal.
Yeah.
Give me more of this shit. This is good shit. And then I took, I was on Zoloft for a good period of time, and then it had an adverse effect. And then as a cop, it was the best training for me as a cop, because now I remember why people stop taking their mental health medication, because they're like, I don't need it anymore. It's working. It's not working. It is working. You feel the way that you feel because it is working. When people with mental health issues, they go, well, I'm going to stop taking it because it's working. For me, it started having an adverse effect. It started chewing up my stomach. I couldn't eat. I couldn't sleep. There were other things that I couldn't do. And I was at least smart enough to call up and be like, listen, either we got to come off this medication altogether, or you got to switch me. And I was so naive. I didn't know anything about mental health medication. I thought there was only like two, like Zoloft and Prozac, like the only two that I ever knew about.
Right.
And doctor's like, all right, we're going to switch you to this. I was like, great, let's switch me to this. Put me on another medication. That medicine had the adverse effect. I couldn't sleep. It just kept me up all night. You know, I got a lot of stuff done around the house, but other than that, it was not good. And then switch me to the one that I'm on right now, and it's freaking fantastic. I love it. Dosage is great, but when you forget to take it, like when I know for a fact it's time release. So if I take it at 9, I got to take it at 9 tomorrow. I know for a fact that at 10 o'clock in the morning tomorrow, I'll feel the effects that I'm off of it. I know immediately that I'm off.
What's it feeling?
It's terrible. It's bouts of like helplessness, depression, just in a funk, just like sweats, you know, just nauseous, just real like withdrawals of it's just I would just categorize it as withdrawals. And then it kind of messes you up for a couple of hours, and then it kind of gets you back on track. But it teaches you not to do that. You only have to do that like twice, and then you're like, all right, we're not going to do this no more.
Yeah.
But now, like what I told you, May 25th, none of it had to do with the scenes that I saw.
Right.
Now that I'm away from the profession, I have not gotten a full night's sleep since I left the job.
No shit. Why?
I wake up at least 3 or 4 times in the middle of the night now, because I'm no longer doing the job every single day. All of the car accidents, all of the dead children, all the homicides are all coming back to me. Like,
I can relate.
Yeah, because you put that down. You're like, I don't have time for that. I got to go to work. Let's get in game mode. I'm in warrior mode. Let's get out there. Let's do our job. When that job is over, and this is what I worry about with retirees, and this is why the suicide rate is so high with retirees, because when you start decompressing and you start thinking about all of that stuff, and I'm not talking about you're walking around shopping at Target and you're thinking about it. This is a second plug for Target. Somebody should give you a sponsorship or something for Target. But Target's the greatest place in the world.
Way better than Walmart. Let's just be honest.
Yes. Well, I go to Walmart to watch people. That sounds creepy. So what was I saying? This is my New York City ADD. That's the next thing I'm getting tested for is ADD.
Yeah.
Attention deficit. So Yeah. I need that medicine. I need that. That's what I need. I need more stuff to take. You know, the pill organizers, they're full to the top with me. No more. No more. So what I was saying is that it's subliminal. Like, it's not like you walking around thinking about these scenes. It's during dreams. At least it's for me. Like, I just this morning at 4:30 this morning, I woke up from a dream that I had about an actual infant death from a car accident. And haven't thought about that thing in 7 years. That thing happened 7 years ago. And you know, these are the traumas that you see. These are the PTSD that you see, but you just put it deep down and you're like, I don't have time for that. I got work to do.
Yeah.
So I think more people are talking about this stuff, like you, like me. Like, there's a lot of podcasts out there, law enforcement podcasts, that are really focusing on it. Bluehelp.org is focusing on suicides. 228 last year, more than line of duty deaths. That's insane. And that's the ones that we know about.
That's what we know.
And forget about the ones that get classified as accidental deaths, like cleaning the gun, kind of wink, wink. Those are the ones that are not being cataloged.
And you know what? And the interesting thing for me too is that it's the same for fire departments too. So it's the same. I mean, not as high numbers, but their numbers are high if you look at them, and they're losing more to suicide than they are in the line of duty. So again, we're seeing some consistencies here with the culture and the leadership, and it's funny because
they sleep a lot though.
Well, they do sleep a lot.
They get a lot of sleep. Any fire people on right now?
John, he's
Are you volunteer? Oh, yeah. They're always working. They're fantastic. Sorry, Jonathan.
It's funny. Yeah, no, I mean, I agree, but obviously I just think that something's going on in the culture all the way around, right, to make us like that. And so, okay, so as we wrap this up, because I don't want to I'll sit here and talk with you all night long, but the thing is what do you think, from somebody who's been in that low, right? You've been there, you've been so low. What are some adjustments? What can we do?
I am a big advocate of PTSD screening at a minimum every quarter in every police department agency.
So what's that look like to you?
To me, what it looks like is you have a tremendous amount of people in the mental health profession that would be willing to come in pro bono, would cost departments nothing. Come in. One page form, completely secret, covered under HIPAA, right? Could be 5 questions. You ever wake up in the middle of the night from a dream, from a nightmare, from a scene that you've dealt with? Have you ever had bouts of feeling low? Not depression. Don't use the D word, because depression scares the shit out of cops.
Yes.
Simple questions like that. I just named off 2 of them. Just simple things. Have you ever got dressed to come into work and thought about not coming in? Have you ever used sick leave when you were not sick? And you used it for quote unquote mental health day? And what we do is we don't vilify those people that answer those honestly. We don't ostracise them. We don't take their gun and badge from them and put them in a corner and vilify them. And that's the problem. Until 100%. We have agencies that don't treat PTSD as a liability issue.
Right.
And that's what happens. Because we want to take their gun. We want to take their badge. We want to take that gun more than anything. And we have to get to the point where that stigma of going to get help is not wrong. There needs to be mental health professionals in the agencies that are examining officers after a major scene. There needs to be peer support team. Let me back up, because I just said what I didn't want to say. We need peer support. We don't need peer support teams. Okay. This is where agencies go wrong.
Yes.
You don't need a team. Okay. The problem with a team for peer support, because I developed a peer support training class with the Roll Call Room podcast. And what I preach is every person in an agency should be part of the peer support group. Okay. Because peer support team, and this has happened, When I was the union vice president in my agency and had an officer that was struggling, I'd call the peer support coordinator and I go, hey, listen, Jim is struggling. Who can he talk to? He's like, oh, I'll email over a list of people. And you look at your email and you look at the list and you're like, fuck, I wouldn't talk to any of those people. They're all assholes. I don't want to talk to any of these people. I wouldn't even trust any of these people to tell any secrets of my dogs.
Right.
And that's the problem is peer support teams isolate you just to specific people on a group.
Yep.
I want to go to Sally. Sally's my best friend. I run calls with her. I want her to turn around and I want to be able to mark out on administrative duties for an hour and talk to Sally for an hour. What does that look like? Smoking a cigar, just chilling, having a cup of coffee from Starbucks, or I'm sorry, can't say Starbucks, but from some coffee place, whatever it looks like. Because right now we don't have that freedom as patrol officers. It is call, paper, paper. There is no downtime unless your supervisors and your commanders are recognizing that you need that downtime. And it goes towards like work hours too. It is ridiculous to work 12 hours straight. It is unnatural for you to work 12 hours straight. We've got to get our patrol officers to work 8 hours somehow.
Yeah, I totally agree. See, I'm a big proponent of the 10-hour shifts and let's work out at the end of shift, and in there, you have an hour break. So like you're saying, you're only working 8 hours, but you're getting paid for 10.
Right.
Yeah. 110%. Like I'm so with you on all of that. So
I hear peer support and I get irate because Lieutenant Colonel Grossman and I were talking about it too, about peer support. And I'm like, peer support is just, it's too much used right now. That's the answer to everything.
Wicked. And one thing too is like, so that's like what chiefs are doing because they're uneducated. Unfortunately, they're like, oh, well, yeah. Okay. I'm going to send, yep.
Yeah.
I'm going to send Becky, Bob, and Tom, and they're going to go be my peer support team. They're going to go CIT. Yeah.
They have trigger words. Like chiefs yell out trigger words. They're just like EAP, peer support, CISM. And you're like, Chief, have you ever tried to call EAP? It is the shittiest thing in the world. When I went through what I went through last year, I called EAP. I hung up on them.
Yeah, I've heard that.
It's horrible because right off the bat, you know what they tell you? You only have 3 free visits. So we got to get this fixed in 3. And you're like, okay, attempt suicide. We're going to fix this in 3 visits. Yeah, sure. Yeah,
you're right.
We're going to do this.
Yeah. Support. There's tons of support.
Yeah.
Well, Nick, I just have to say, I think, and I know you know this, but I'm just going to say this from somebody who's been in the game for a minute, is your vulnerability is huge and it is really healing. It's very healing, because I'm sitting here and while I was never suicidal, I was really low. My entire agency, like they chewed me up and spit me out so quickly. And I'm going to say this, for women, it happens very consistently. Okay. And especially if you're a woman like me who has an opinion, I become a bitch and nobody likes it. Okay. Yeah. Especially uneducated, insecure men who are my supervisors. And so I'm just saying that, I've been there, I've been where you are, and to be able to just have like this open and honest conversation, like just 2 cops, like, yo, it's real. What I mean? And we're not doing it for the gram, we're not doing it for the likes and for, the follows and shit. It's like, no, like I'm here and you're where you are and you're like, hey guys, like, yeah, this happened to me. And I'm on this podcast because 1, it's therapeutic for me, but 2, I'm going to try to save a life, which you have. And I just think it's really, we need more authenticity. We need more of that.
And unfortunately, I think you have to leave once I left the profession, then my muzzle completely came off.
Oh,
Now I just do whatever the fuck I want. Now I just, and like you said, I'm not doing this for the gram. Like over 100,000 listeners. I'm not Joe Rogan. I don't have a big major contract from Spotify.
Right.
I got a whiskey cup company and a coffee company that's my sponsorship. Like, I'm not driving around in a Bentley, It is for the mission.
It is.
That's what it's for.
That's one. And what's cool is that that is, and with your consistency, I've been doing this for a minute, and there are so many days and so many weeks where I'm like, no, I don't have it in me. Like I just, and whatever pops up, and and you get in your head, even though it's inaccurate that nobody's listening. Sometimes you feel like nobody's listening, because with a podcast, other than when you're doing interviews and stuff, you're doing it by yourself. And sometimes, that's just how it feels. Like, geez, is anybody even listening to me? Like, I am out here and I'm raw and I'm vulnerable and I'm like, holy shit. Right. But you know what? It's those emails that you've received. You said you've received over 100
it's
and
incredible.
Yeah.
It's incredible.
And that's the point. And
I'm
that's
just waiting for that Target sponsorship. Once that comes,
Target.
I will.
Somebody needs to call
soul.
Target right now
I
and
will
get
sell
them
my soul.
to sponsor Nick.
Listen, if they just give me a $50 Target gift card, I'll wear whatever they want. I'll say whatever they want. I'll even take a $20 Walmart gift card. I don't care. That's what we get to do. You said something.
It's so
Flower
funny.
season. I need some dirt.
I need I'm all about, they have this water. I have like a water fountain or whatever, and I'm all about,
Oh, you're bougie.
yeah.
My water fountain is my sink.
Well, it doesn't mine. We have this well. We have the well water.
Enough said.
Yeah. And
I live in bougie town.
It's hard.
Nice and
Yeah.
filtered.
So I have to go get my filtered water. I mean, the well's not bad. It's just sometimes it's hard, and sometimes it smells like rotten eggs, and who the hell wants to drink that? It's because it's so hard.
No, can't do it.
You
Sorry.
don't live it. You city boy. You're a city
Damn
slicker.
right.
Clearly.
Damn right. I need my
Mhm.
Starbucks right around the corner.
Oh,
I mean
jeez.
that coffee company. Wink,
Yeah.
wink.
That's so funny. Okay. Nick, thank you. That's what I have for you. But I'm going to open it up. You guys have anything you want to say, or do you want to talk to him? Yeah, Don does. You have to unmute yourself. I can't unmute you guys.
No, I said John. John's the
Oh. Go ahead, John.
But thank you, Nick. Thanks for sharing everything. That's awesome.
Thank you. I appreciate it, Don. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Anybody else?
Oh, damn, I did good.
Yeah, you did. You made him speechless.
I know.
Nobody?
Oh yeah.
John's thinking.
Okay.
Shannon,
Oh.
I have
Okay.
a question.
All
let
right.
loose.
I'll pause. Does anybody else have anything else they want to say? Any mastermind members? Do you want to, Shan? Go ahead.
Yeah. Well, I'm just wondering what you or any of you guys think needs to change to make mental health medication be more
Not stigmatized, not negative.
I think the more officers that talk about being on it, because I got to tell you something, I have never ever heard any law enforcement officer other than and I've been in law enforcement since I was 16 years old. That's when I started in law enforcement in the NYPD. And I have never heard any officer actively talk about taking mental health medication while being on duty.
Hmm.
And my medication, I would take my medication. I'd take two. I would take my antidepressant before I went into work. And 10 minutes before I got into work, I took my anti-anxiety medication because my anxiety was so high. I constantly was in fear that I was going to get stabbed in the back, not from citizens, not from the
Not
criminal,
literally, figuratively.
from my own command staff.
Yeah.
And ultimately that was the defining moment why I resigned. April 25th as I said, the fact that I have to take medication to go into work, that's a problem. That's a freaking problem. Does the cashier at Target have to take, and again, fourth time, does the cashier at Target have to take medication to go to work? I bet you not. I bet you not. But for me to be able to go into work and just get through 30 minutes of roll call, I have to take this little blue pill for me to get through it. And then once I get out of roll call and I get into my cruiser, I feel great because I don't have to see anybody at the glass castle, we used to call it, which was headquarters. Once I'm in the public, I'll run towards gunfire. I'll save whoever I can save. But it's inside of headquarters where I'm like dodging bullets. I'm like, oh my God, this is the bullying. And it's just not my own agency. The pleasure of doing the podcast and having people that inbox message me and text message me and email me, they're like, holy crap, man, my department is the same exact way.
Mhm.
So it's systemic. It's everywhere. It doesn't matter what patch you're wearing. It's the same crap. It's
Yes.
the same crap.
So true.
And
So
and
true.
these commanders like to say, like leaders like to say, family first, family first. That's all you hear. Family first, until it inconveniences or understaffs them. Then it's no
100%.
longer family. Then it's like, oh,
the
no, I
family.
need you to, I need you to, well, you causing a shortage, and you're like, yeah, but it's my family. Like,
Mhm.
I'm here for you every other day. I just need this day off. Nope, sorry.
Just to say that, I'll never forget. I was, my husband, he's a state trooper. Everyone knew him. The PD I worked for, everybody knew him. Everybody knew we were living together. We had been together for years. It wasn't a new thing, right? And he lost his grandfather.
Mm.
And I remember calling my sergeant, and I'm like, hey, listen, will you give me the day of, like, I can't remember what it's called. There's a technical term, but like when somebody loses,
Yeah,
yeah. Yes. So I'm like, can I have that? And absolutely not. I'm like,
oh my God.
are you serious? He's like, no, you can't have that. He's not your husband. I'm like, okay, but I've been with him for like ever, and you guys know him, and like, can you give me something? Well,
Great leader.
Are you telling me you're calling out sick, but if you're not home? And I'm like, you're gonna make me take a vacation day, and that was exactly what they made me do.
I was an anomaly when I was a sergeant, because when people would call and they would go, hey, listen, I got some personal stuff, I would go, let me stop you right there. What do you need?
Yep.
And they're like, I just need the day. And I go, oh, do you feel comfortable with telling me what's going on? And if it was something really bad, I would go, I see your day and I raise you a day. Because I knew that those 2 days, I was going to get paid back in dividends.
Yes.
And they came back from those 2 days, they were going to be like, Nick, Sergeant Ruggiero, that's a stand-up fucking guy.
Mm-hmm.
That guy looks out for me. That guy took care of me.
Mm-hmm.
But in the end, when you leave these agencies, nobody's there. They're all gone. They're all gone. 308 officers in the agency that I left, 4 of them called me. 4.
Yeah.
That's
Nick, let me tell you, I feel like
so
throwing
bad.
my whole notebook. Yeah. I mean,
So
my
bad.
50, I got uninvited from my partner's wedding.
Yeah. 4.
I'm like, what? Yeah.
And then
Well,
they
4.
want to be your Facebook friends. They're all just like,
Oh yeah, they want to creep on you.
Yeah, and then-
Hell
yeah. And when I said that I wrote a book, then that's when all like the fake friends come out. They're all like, "Oh, you wrote a book? What?
Oh,
You wrote a book? You can write?" I was like, "Whoa, take it easy. I use Dragon software. Talk to text. 'Cause I type how I talk, folks. Commas
Yeah.
and periods every couple of inches. That's why it's been at the editors for like a month. So
That'll be me when it's my turn. It's going to be there for like a year.
or if you do it, I swear to you, the editing is the worst.
Yeah. That's what I've heard.
The
It's funny.
worst.
It's funny that you say all that too, just because like when you make a post, right? Because now you can talk freely. I can talk freely. I mean, I'm still
Oh, yeah.
technically a law enforcement officer, but my chief he just doesn't care. He's like, yeah, you're fine. Just say whatever, do whatever. You're good. I'm like, okay. And so like, I'll make a post and I'm like, da-da-da-da, and I'm just saying it. And oh yeah, all those people I used to work with.
Yep.
Oh, Autumn. Yeah, I really got your back. I'm like, really, Frankie? I haven't heard from you in like 3 years. What are you talking about?
Well, when I left my agency, my former co-host still worked at the agency, and for his benefit, I stayed quiet, and I think that messed up my coping with what happened to me because I couldn't say what I wanted to say. I could, but I couldn't. And then when they started to circle around him, and he left the show, and I was like, "Game on! Get ready! Here it comes! Here it comes!" And I just because I was a sergeant for 7 years, I saw a lot of stuff get covered up.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
I watched dirty bags of laundry get dragged through hallways, and that's a very, very that's bad.
Yeah.
That's really, really bad. My thing is just the tip of the iceberg. And if it can happen to me, it could happen to anybody. And I was the vice president of the union in my department, and they did that to me. The vice president of the union.
Yep.
I was like, it's astounding. It's just astounding. But
it is.
I hope our profession takes a pendulum swing the other way very soon. I hope.
Yeah. Yeah. Me too. Go ahead. Another question.
I know it's recent since you've, stepped away from law enforcement. Do you find yourself, law enforcement officers are hypervigilant. They're always checking their surroundings. Do you still, do that?
Yes.
And, or do you find yourself, or notice yourself being less vigilant?
I'll tell you, that's a really good question. I find myself not wanting to go out as often. And I'll tell you why is I always had that protection off duty with if I took action, I knew that I was covered under my union. If I took action with my duty weapon or an off duty weapon, I knew that I was covered. Now I don't want to go out because I don't want to go out unarmed. I've just been so trained now that so much stuff happens off duty that I always feel like I constantly need to be armed to protect my family. Not so much me, more my family. And I don't do that anymore. When I go out, I don't carry because I'm petrified of getting jammed up. Like I'm petrified now. I'm not under that umbrella of protected law enforcement. But when I do go out, I'm even more hyper vigilant, like you said, because I'm not armed, and I don't think that'll ever go away. It's funny that you say that because I was just driving around in the car today, and I'm driving down the road, and I'm like, burnt out taillight, expired tag, registration expired. I don't think I'll ever stop doing that. I don't think I'll ever, like when you're driving down the road, you're on duty right now, and when you're off duty, you probably do it too. I'll be driving down the road and I'll go, that car's dirty, guaranteed that car's dirty. Gun or drugs, one of the two, gun or drugs. And I don't think I'll ever give it up. And what saddens me is that is a skill set that's very, very difficult to acquire, and to let that go from an agency, it baffles my mind. It makes me so angry because the newer officers that are coming in can't spot hand to hands. They didn't come up in the drug war era. So when all of this calms down from the demonstrations and the riots, and the homicide rates start going through the roof, and the drug war starts up again, I guarantee you by 2025, the drug war will start up again. It will start up. Because when we start defunding and we start canceling federal grants for these law enforcement agencies, you'll see PCP, you'll see heroin, which opioids are already at an all-time high. You're going to see that skyrocket. You're going to see overdoses double within the next year or two, because you're going to defund these agencies that could barely afford to do anything. That's a slippery slope. It's a slippery slope.
I say make it all legal. You wanna kill yourself? Go ahead. You wanna rot your teeth out? Go ahead.
Just do it at home. That's all I ask.
Yeah, exactly.
Just do it at home.
And then don't call us, please. Do not call us.
There should be a separate, like there's Space Force now. There should be like Death Force.
Yeah.
Just call them. Like it's like 811 instead of 911. We just come and pick you up.
Yeah.
We just come to your house and we scoop you up. Because those DOAs, I don't like them. You just call 811 and we're like, where do you have it? And they're like, right here. And you just scoop them up. We don't even have to do a report.
Right.
You just put it on a Post-it note.
Yeah, exactly. No good.
Put it on a Post-it note and put it on your forehead as they zip you up.
Yep. I feel the same way.
And a purge day.
So Nick, tell everybody where they can come and find you.
You can find me at rollcallroom.com. You can email me at nick@rollcallroom.com. You can pre-order my book at mentalhealthbarricade.com.
Yeah, when does that come out? Because I want to share that when that comes out. Well, it has to get past the editor, so we don't know.
I am pushing for August.
Okay.
I'm pushing for August. The printing only takes like a week, which is amazing. The pre-orders are already out, and the pre-orders are doing really, really well.
Nice.
Which is super cool. It's 11 chapters, and it is raw and uncut. Like it is. I had my oldest daughter, who's 17, read first 3 chapters, and she bawled her eyes out for an hour. Just raw and uncut. It's going to piss off a lot of commanders, I can tell you that. So they can find me there. Always reach out. My email is always on nick@rollcallroom.com.
I love that. Thank you very much, Nick. Sheepdog Nation. We'll see you next time.
They buried me in the water and I came out new. Ha ha. Now I'm baptized in blue. I'm a fighter, I'm a winner, never quit. I refuse to lose. I got heart and I got grit. I'm a warrior that's been baptized in blue. I'm a warrior that's been baptized in blue. I'm a fighter, never winner, never quit. I refuse to lose. I got heart and I got grit. I'm a warrior that's been baptized in blue. I'm a warrior that's been baptized in blue. They buried me in the water in the Holy Ghost. I came out with a badge and gun and a heart that said never run. I signed up for a job you wouldn't dare to do. This ain't no green screen movie, don't compare the two. We look at your actions in the elements and everything relevant. If they line up, prepare to pay the consequence. You do dirt, you get cussed, no bluff. It's ignorant to think we will shoot with your hands up if you the police. You feel the world is against you, like every call you go to, people trying to tempt you. Well, Hail Mary, Hail Mary, Hail Mary. I ride on the devil, I ain't scary, and I ain't worried. You want my life, come take it, it's gonna be a fight. I take you to the light, like Will and Bright. I wouldn't expect you to understand what I do, only the thin blue line, cause they baptized in blue. I'm a fighter, I'm a winner, never quit. I refuse to lose. I got heart and I got grit. I'm a warrior that's been baptized in blue. I'm a warrior that's been baptized in blue. I'm a fighter, never winner, never quit. I refuse to lose. I got heart and I got grit. I'm a warrior that's been baptized in blue. I'm a warrior that's been baptized in blue. I can't explain the pain when I see a name on the wall. All I feel is rage, put me in a cage, let me brawl. Sometimes I can't help but cry, like why did he die? I know it was him, but it could have been I. What about the kids? What about the spouse? Yeah, now who gon' put food inside them babies' mouth? It's a bigger picture when the officer down. Domino effect, Blue Nation, family, country, and town. The media don't cover us. Well, maybe Fox, cause MSNBC and CNN surely don't care about cops. Politicians more concerned about protecting the legal instead of laying the law down and protecting the people. Let me get off my soapbox before I curse. I don't seen way too many cops riding in hearse. Well, I wouldn't expect you to understand what I do, only the thin blue line, cause they baptized in blue. I'm a fighter, I'm a winner, never quit. I refuse to lose. I got heart and I got grit. I'm a warrior that's been baptized in blue. I'm a warrior that's been baptized in blue. I'm a fighter, never winner, never quit. I refuse to lose. I got heart and I got grit. I'm a warrior that's been baptized in blue. I'm a warrior that's been baptized in blue. If I'm faced with a mission, I'm gonna complete it. If that means being deleted, I live with the credence. I do this for the combat vets and LEOs. When I'm suited, ready to go, it's either friend or foe. Only Lord knows what my future's in store. I only kill with the hope to see more, so God don't close that door. If I take a life, it's him or me, with the hopes to survive, not bigotry. I go in situations that you cannot imagine, deal with things that you cannot fathom. Know it, but I'd rather fight for a cause than live for nothing. So when you read my headstone, you know I died for something. You hypersensitive shit complain by justified force. You blame the cops first, that don't work, you blame the courts. But I wouldn't expect you to understand what I do, only the thin blue line, cause they baptized in blue. I'm a fighter, I'm a winner, never quit. I refuse to lose. I got heart and I got grit. I'm a warrior that's been baptized in blue. I'm a warrior that's been baptized in blue. I'm a fighter, never winner, never quit. I refuse to lose. I got heart and I got grit. I'm a warrior that's been baptized in blue. I'm a warrior that's been baptized in blue.